Welcome to the Miracle You, guiding you on the journey towards finding passion and purpose and how to discover, create, and live a life by your design. Whether your success has been plentiful or your missed opportunities have been overwhelming, we can help you become a more empowered, masterful person and show you how to share your gift with the world. It's time to inspire change from within with the host of the Miracle You, Vince Kramer.
Hello, imagination. I'm Vince Kramer, your host, and welcome to the Miracle You, where you learn about the magic of living your life by finding the example in real life. We have all been blessed with gifts and talents that are uniquely ours. Yes, there's other people out there that have the same gifts or the same talents, but the combination of them coming together are uniquely ours, which makes us unique in the world, which makes us special. And the world needs us to bring those gifts and talents out in a way that supports the world in finding their own gifts and talents. As you know, in the past, I've shared that our definition of miracle is through an act of love, sharing your gifts and talents in a way that others can share theirs. Some of those gifts and talents might not be accepted by society. And today's guest is going to share how her gifts weren't necessarily accepted. As a medical doctor, she found it difficult to take out into the world of her peers the fact that she was a medical intuitive, truly a psychic. And in that information and in that direction, she found it hard not only to take it out into the world, but to accept it in herself initially. And it took some pretty big wake-up calls, like clinical depression and really even a physical injury, to get her to take notice of who she was and to decide that I have to share that with the world. So I hope you find your gifts and talents, and I hope that you realize that even those things that you believe wouldn't be or aren't accepted by society are probably the biggest gifts that you're bringing to the world. I'm with Dr. Veronica Anderson. She's a MD, a medical intuitive, functional medicine practitioner, and a homeopath, and the author of the book, But Now I See, which is a medical intuitive surgeon's guide to the meaning of your illness and how to heal from chronic and incurable disease. Dr. Veronica began her medical career as an eye surgeon and now has the distinction of being both a licensed physician and a practicing psychic. As a best-selling author and speaker, she has appeared on national TV and spoken to many groups across the country. Her intuitive rejuvenation journey program guides people to wellness, but not only working on the physical aspects of wellness, but holistically, and also unlocking and clearing the emotional, spiritual, and energetic triggers, as well as the root causes of disease. Welcome, Dr. Veronica. Are you ready to share the miracle of you with the imagination?
Well, absolutely, Vince. I am so happy that you have me on. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for being here. It's very exciting. Dr. Veronica and I have known each other for a little over a year now. And I tell you, it's so exciting to bring someone into the world that is stepping out and really bringing some unique gifts and talents to it. So I am so excited that you're here. And I really didn't share that much in your bio about you. Could you give us a little bit more about you personally, as well as some of the work that you're doing now?
Well, it's so funny because when you read my when you're reading my bio, there's a couple of things that happen. First, I said, "Is that really me?" And then the other side of me says, "That's a little bit boring sounding." And I think most people would say, "That's not boring," except I feel like that's all in the past. And I'm always looking about going forward. And so a little bit about my past is I always wanted to be a doctor since it's interesting because there were two things I wanted to be. It was a doctor or a pilot. And I told you that, Vince, before. I was like, I'm going to be a doctor or a pilot. So I picked a doctor. But I always had these dreams of being a pilot too. And so from a little girl of about 4, I was thinking of that path of I gotta do something to help people, and I ended up choosing the doctor path. But going along the way, I've always been the type of person who has had quote unquote visions, but I didn't even realize it was anything unusual. These visions that I had, I just, it was more than an imagination, but I realized at a point in time that my visions were coming true, but it's not something I necessarily talked about. It's the way you think everybody else in the world is. But then when I realized that it wasn't something that everybody experienced, these type of visions of being a seer and a knower, you just shut up about it because you're kind of embarrassed, especially if you're doing something very scientific like traditional Western medicine. There's no place for visions. There's no place for intuition. There's no place for these abilities that aren't rooted in biochemistry and physiology. But as the world would have it, I actually got outed when I was at a convention. I sat across the table from this woman who didn't know me and looked at me and said to me, "You have visions, don't you?" And I didn't want to tell anybody still at this point. This is about 6 years ago now. And I was still at the point of just fearful of telling people that I had the abilities that I did. And what continued to happen is other people started pointing these abilities out to me, and I wasn't doing anything with them. And then one day I went out running. I tripped and fell, tore everything in my knee. And that's when I finally got the message. And so this is what I talk about in my book, how your illnesses and injuries, the universe is sending a message to you. And if you don't listen to that message that your body's conveying to you, the universe will have a way of making it more and more and more and more severe until you have to stop in your tracks and evaluate what is the spiritual message that I'm getting. And my message was I was not on my master path because I was not using any of my intuitive abilities, especially to help other people. So this is where I am now. And so how I ended up, the story of me meeting Vince is, interesting because we ended up in the same mastermind group of me figuring out not just how do I help people with their illnesses and injuries and learning how to tell what that means, but how do I help other practitioners harness their intuition to be able to help people heal faster. And so this is where I am now, and it's a fun time of life. I'm the type of person I have, maybe people call it attention deficit, but it's hard for me to keep my mind and my energies and my gifts in one area. So I'm doing a lot of things, and some of those things are figuring out what's next and who needs my help. Which is why, I love talking to you, Vince, because it's like, okay, well, what's next for me? Come on, round table, tell me what's next for me.
And we're going to talk a little bit about what's next for you a little bit later. But if you were to tell the world right now what your divine intent is, what your mission in life is, what would you say it is in this now?
For people to realize that they themselves have all the power within to move up to the next level and actually overcome and heal. I want everyone to realize that it's not something that's outside of you. It's not some being outside of you. It's not some person outside of you. All the tools for you to be the best you can be are right inside of you.
Veronica, how have you experienced that yourself?
Well, I gotta say, even when I'm feeling irritated, like after getting off a red eye and, trying to be productive for a day, I realized that I have this wonderful life. And when I go out and I put my mind to it, what I want manifests. And not only just what I want, but what I need. And I'm at the point in time when I realize what I need is coming to me. And at this point, because I'm coachable and I'm a quick learner, it's a lot of magnificent stuff that's coming to me. And I realize that I create my world. And most people think that they are a victim of the world. And I realize that I create my world. And it's just, a wonderful place to be. And so that's what I talk about. I want other people to understand that too. So when I do my work now, when people come to me for the intuitive knowledge, I realize that one of the pieces that I always give them is this uplifting message. And sometimes when you do this type of work, you don't even think that you're doing this because you deal with a lot of people in distress. As a doctor, you deal with a lot of people in distress. And you think, am I doing something for somebody? Is this all worth it? And then, I'll get an email from somebody I worked with a year ago who will say, I'm just so happy that I met you. And you're like, okay, really means it's worth it and I need to keep doing it. So, the universe constantly giving me the feedback that, yes, you are on the path. You just have to be patient. And just when I think I want to move and forget about it, the universe will give me a signal, give me a sign that, stay on the path. The universe will tell me that, come on, Veronica, stop being a little girl where you need that feedback all the time. So stop asking for the feedback all the time. But and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, Vince, where you want to get a certain type of feedback, and then you just have to let go and surrender. And when you let go and surrender, something better than you could even imagine comes to you. And that's what's happened to me in my life. And so when you let go and don't try to control what's happening, but you have the intent of what you want the outcome to look like, it happens, just not necessarily on the path that you think it's going to happen.
Yeah, you bet. Right on. And the interesting thing is when you stop looking for feedback, there's a lot in your life that happens that, if nothing else, confirms where you're at, what you're thinking. The interesting thing you said earlier, you talked about, and as you know, Imagine Miracles is really all about finding yourself and finding your own answers. You talked about how the universe keeps giving us a louder and louder wake-up call until we hear it. Could you share with us your loudest wake-up call and maybe some of those little ones that you didn't pay attention to before the big one came?
My loudest wake-up call. Well, it's interesting because, as you were asking the question, there were, things flash in of, what was that most profound moment in my life? And it's kind of like I have two humps, and the humps are very close together. And one of the humps is when I fell into a deep clinical depression, and I ended up with a psychologist, a therapist, who was both a theologian, a minister, and professor at a seminary, but also a psychologist on the other side, who was able to guide me through the darkness. And through the darkness, allowing me to be introspective through it. And so instead of, I was so depressed, I had to go twice a week. And she suggested maybe you want to consider some medication. But I didn't. And I remember she gave me the book about Dark Nights of the Soul, and I read that. And it was just one of those times in my life. It was, you look back and you say, wow, I came through that. And I learned something about me. I learned about my resilience. I learned about how the mind can heal, the body can heal. It's meant to heal. And also when you think you're having your darkest days, how the universe will take you by the hand, especially if you continue to have faith and patience and wait. And so, as I went through that time in life, it was a time where I was going through my divorce from my first husband, and all the people who were a part of my life at that point had kind of abandoned me. There were very few people who are in my life now who were in my life back then, and it was lonely and dark and cold. But now, because of that period of time, I have the most wonderful friends. I realize, there were few people who were there before who are there now, and it's, clear that they love me for me. And then, the other piece that happened coming out of that darkness and was very interesting is I met my current husband, and we were both at a point where we just figured all the good stuff was behind us, It's just, that's it, and so that was one of those big boom times. And then I'd say that was a huge big hump, because when you have depression, and I know there's people who are in the audience who know how I feel, you feel like you were surprised the sun came up, and you just feel like you're going to die. You feel like you're going to die. But the interesting part about that for me is I knew I didn't want to die, even though I felt like I was going to. And so there was always, even in those dark days, that glimmer that, there really is something beautiful out there. There is really something better out there. And the universe really is a loving place. And so I would say that's one of the big turning points in my life. And then the second part, which, I alluded to, was when I ran down the street and I ripped up my leg, and I was forced into admitting that I had some skills, gifts, and talents that I hadn't been using, that I've been hiding and keeping secret, that I had to start using. And so, I felt like the whole preparation in my life, everything that happened before those dark days, was the preparation to be able to get through that darkness and get through those times of uncertainty. And then when you peek your head up, something else happens and you say, okay, you know what, I can do this, and let me just figure this out. I had, when I had my injury, it was a big deal. And you understand, because you've been going through some stuff with you. It was a big deal. And still something that is my body has healed 98%, but that 2% just reminds me that, you know what, you have to do what you're supposed to do. The 2% that's there. And so when people are looking at their illnesses and injury, you may be able to completely be cured of something that's physical or emotional, but you also may have something lingering that's a reminder, so that you will stay true to yourself. And so my lingering twinges in that area of my body, that lingering of, hey, I have to rebalance, because after, the injury, physically, I have to do all kinds of different techniques to rebalance myself, is a reminder to not just balance on a physical standpoint, but balance on an emotional and spiritual standpoint, and pay attention to all of it, not just one piece of it.
Wow. The interesting thing is the body is continuously giving us messages, as you know, and sometimes those little messages are really what it takes to stay within the boundaries of that path and keep us on that straighter journey. I really appreciate that. And what you mentioned about, developing your gifts and talents to be able to get through the tough time, is just part of it, because so many gifts and talents come when we're in that tough time. Also, the ability to have compassion and empathy for others when we experience those big wake up calls. And There's so many people out there that are depressed, especially in the world that we're living in right now. And your ability, because of your experiences, to share with them, really opens the door up for you to bring so much more to the world. The interesting thing is, you talk about being a psychic. I'm going to go a little bit off the format and ask you, how has that gone over with your contemporaries in the medical world?
Oh, well, it depends. There are, there's of course the hard line of people that look at you and talk about how you're a fraud and you're a fake and all this other side. And then there's that group of people that whispers to you and says, I wish I had the courage to do something like that, and wants to know more about it. And then there's the group of people that are just like, this is so refreshing. How do I harness that in my life as a practitioner? But I would say the majority of my practitioner colleagues, 75%, maybe 80%, are probably like, we don't even want to talk about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because this is what's making people ill. I mean, think about it. Today in America, we are spending the most money of any time in history of any nation in the world per capita on our people, and yet we're getting sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. We have immunotherapy, we have gene therapy, we have all the latest and greatest. And what's happening is the number three cause of people getting sick or dying is from some type of medical intervention. And so what we're not realizing is that the stuff that I'm talking about is where it's at. When somebody's walking into the office of the practitioner, it's because they're having a spiritual and an emotional crisis. And if you don't deal with that, the layman, most people would call it stress, you're not going to get well, or you're going to keep getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And so the practitioners who it's all about the science of biochemistry and physiology, who don't look at that other side of the world, are really missing it. And so although a lot of my colleagues are naysayers, I don't even care, because when I go out and speak and the general public is in the audience, they come up to me and say, oh my God, why aren't there more people like you? And that's what keeps me doing it. And so you get to the point where you realize that you're on the other side of the curve. Just like, you and what you do, you're really on the other side of the curve, but you know it's the right thing to do, because the people who need help the most are the ones who are responding. So I'm not here necessarily to heal other practitioners or even convince them whether I'm right or wrong or how they should practice. I'm here to help people who said, I tried everything. I got something strange. I have something rare. It's peculiar. I've been everywhere. I've done everything. Nobody can tell me what it is or what to do about it. I'm falling apart. What do I do? Those are the type of people who need practitioners like me. They've tried all the other people with all the wonderful pieces of paper on their wall. I got all the wonderful pieces of paper on my wall too. But then I realized one day that those pieces of paper on the wall were not helping in getting people well. And there was some other skill, some other talent that was helping people. And when you see people who are suffering and they start getting better, that's what keeps you doing it. And so my proof that it works is that people heal.
Right, right. And that is the only proof, really. And, somebody asked me the other day how I felt about Western medicine, and I am a believer in Western medicine because in some cases it gives us time to do the work that we really need to do. What caused that disease to begin with? What wake-up call drove that torn up knee? And to look at that angle. And sometimes we just need the time. So I'm definitely not against the Western medical world, but this is an and both world. And we need to live in that world. And we need to let people know that the rules of the past were just a set of rules laid down by a belief system that wasn't as expanded as we are now, and the vibration of the world as it's changing, that expansion is coming so much faster. One of the big definitions that we share in Imagine Miracles is the definition of a miracle from the way we see it as through an act of love, sharing your gifts and talents with the world so others can share theirs. Can you give us an example of how you're sharing the gifts and talents that you have, how bringing the medical world of being an MD and the world of being a medical intuitive together, how that's helped people as a whole, or maybe even a specific case?
It's interesting because I was like saying, the audience should just realize that having a Ivy League degree and a medical school degree with honors graduates behind it, and then going off and doing something that's 180 degrees away is an act of love. I mean, just as simple like that. You Here's the one thing that we were talking about. We were talking about as a practitioner, as a doctor, having compassion and empathy for others. And what I would say is that one of the miracles is when you realize that the first thing you got to do is have compassion and empathy for yourself. And that is, I had two big messages like that. The messages when I went through the depression and when I went through the big injury where I had to just stop everything was that, you know what? I need to be more gentle on myself and be more loving to myself. And so there's so many people out there who are practitioners who are so hard on themselves, all doctors, nurses, it doesn't matter. Even if people who are holistics, naturopaths, chiropractors, they're so hard on themselves and they would never be that hard on anybody else there. And so what needs to be learned right now? The miracle is when we start having compassion for ourselves. And it's interesting that I've noticed that the more self-care that I do, more and not just talking about it, because I see a lot of people, the big, thing of 2018 has been self-care, self-care, self-care. I got to do more self-care, except that people are yakking about it and not actually doing it. And so we have to realize that number one is me, and people feel like it's an ego thing. And so I realize that I'm taking care of me before I take care of anybody else. You need to learn how to say no, especially women need to learn how to say no too. And when you say no and you take care of yourself, the universe will love you back in that way, and you're going to be able to do more for people, easier for people when you tend to yourself first. And to me, it's a miracle to realize that when I help me first, I help everybody else even more.
That's a very important message to share, and thank you for bringing that out, because you can't love if you don't love yourself. You can't give if you can't give to yourself. And unfortunately, we believe just the opposite, that we have to give on the outside and watch ourselves deteriorate. So, well, thanks for that great message that you shared with us.
Well, let me say
Go
something
ahead.
about that give. A lot of times people give because they don't feel like they deserve. And that's being hard on yourselves and not loving yourself. And so when you see somebody that they're so loving and giving, a lot of times look at them from another way. You see that they're so wonderful, and you'll realize, and you see a lot of people like this, that they're giving because they're fearful that if they're not doing all that stuff, they're not going to be deserving of love.
Mhm.
And they are. And so that overgiving is problematic. And so that's a different way of looking at it. Sometimes people say, oh, so-and-so's a saint. And when they say so-and-so's a saint, it really means that they're a doormat that lets everybody walk over them. And so therefore, and they deal with all the crap. Guess what? Why they're dealing with their crap? They're usually dealing with that crap because they don't love themselves enough, and they are fearful because they don't love themselves enough that everybody else won't love them if they're not doing all the crap and being the doormat. And so when everybody needs to think about that. Think about when you're doing something, exactly why you're doing it. Are you doing it out of the space of gratitude, love, and joy? Because I love this and I really want to do it. And I don't care how people feel about me and I have the ability to say no. Or are you doing it out of fear of those people in the family aren't going to love me if I don't do it. The universe isn't going to love me if I don't do it. God's not going to love me if I don't do that. And so this is why I start my book out with, is your church killing you? That's the first chapter in my book, because religion is one of those things that in some places there's the preaching of fear. If you don't do this, if you don't say that, oh my God, you did this wrong. You were divorced, when you were 18 and, now you're 80 and on your deathbed. And oh my God, I mean, you see people who are fearful and live their whole life out of fear. And that's not what the universe is. The universe loves you. And you need to understand that do it out of a place of gratitude, love, and joy, not out of a place of fear, whatever you're doing. And so it's just, I know somebody needs to hear that message right now.
You bet. And thanks for sharing it. One of the things that I share quite often is that fear and love can't exist in the same place. And when you think that you're experiencing love from a place of fear, you really haven't had a chance to experience it yet. And everybody deserves to be loved. Everybody deserves to love from the bottom of their heart into their fullest. So thanks for sharing that. It's very important. And I agree. There's more than one out there that I'm sure needed to hear that in this moment. I've got a question for you. I'd like you to share with us something that's coming in your future to live your mission even greater, to live your divine intent in a way that you haven't yet. Could you share it with us? Kind of give us the first look at where Dr. Veronica is going with her work.
I know at some point where I'm going. I know I've always lived in America in the Northeast. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York. That's the only place I've lived, although I've been a lot of other places in the world. And my desire has been to be able to at least live part of my life in another part of the world outside the United States. And so in my future, I realize that part of my message and part of my sharing is going to be to a much bigger audience. Now, we have a bigger audience now because we have the internet, or where you could share all over. In fact, how I realized, and it was so in my face that I had these gifts, was from dealing with an international audience over, the phone and the internet. But I believe that one of the pieces that's going to happen in my life is I'm going to have the time to physically spend a more of my time in a different place, in some different cultures. I don't necessarily see, maybe it will be, I don't see myself going, off in the wilderness or something like that, but just in a different place where the people are different from me, and they want to hear the message. And I'll be here too. I'll be here in, stateside too, but I foresee that. And it's interesting because as I'm going out and doing more speaking and teaching, I'm getting a lot more invitations from abroad, from internationally, than I am from the United States. And so everything is going towards pulling me where I will have the opportunity to spend. And I think it's important too, in these times where half the population is reacting on fear of other people coming into our space. I'm like, listen, I want all kinds of people in our space. And not only do I want other people in my space, I want to have the opportunity to go and share other people's space so we can realize how much we all are alike when we strip away that physical body, how much we all are alike. So my future is very across cultures, across, state lines, national lines, all over the place, to spread a message of this message of love. I feel right now that in America we have this message that's coming out that's saying that we don't love everybody, and I really believe that most Americans aren't about that, and the ones that are saying some of that just haven't been around enough people. They just haven't been out enough to realize that we all want the same thing. We all want to be able to eat good food, spend time with our families, sleep, have shelter, and enjoy what the universe has to offer. And when we go across and we sit around with other people, we realize that we all really are alike.
I think it's almost like me looking in the mirror, or at least hearing myself talk. Mary and I have lived in Mexico and absolutely love the people. And we've had dinners in households in the Middle East, in South America, in Central America, in Europe. And yeah, I agree with you 100%. As soon as we can see that we are all alike and we are all really based in love, it will really change the world. You know, it's sad for me because we're running out of time. So um, I'm sure there's going to be opportunities for us to talk again. But before you go, could you share a piece of parting guidance that would really help us in finding ourselves and moving forward in life?
So we talked about before I'm going to tell you my favorite book. My favorite book is The Four Agreements. And if you haven't read The Four Agreements, anybody out there, you must read The Four Agreements, because it just really changes the way you think. It's a truth, and everybody who's ever read that book, it resonates with them. I don't know anybody who's ever said that's false. They always look and say, this is very true. So that's my favorite book. And so but my biggest message is be true to yourself and have confidence in yourself. Realize that when you're having something that you're perceiving as unpleasant that's happening in your life, a drama or a trauma, and that includes an illness or an injury, it's a message from the loving universe for you to pay attention. And when you pay attention, the universe will love you back. And a lot of times that's how healing takes place, not from the doctor, but from your own self. Your own body knows how to heal. So my role is to guide people in finding what's going to have them heal.
And a powerful body and mind each of us have. Veronica, I know there's people out there that want to know more about your work, know more about your programs, who you are, maybe even where you're going to go next. How can they find out more about you?
So drveronica.com is my website, drveronica.com. And I'll just mention I'm giving away the Ward Off Colds and Flu Toolkit, drveronica.com/flu. People have been loving that because you want to stay well. And not only does this keep you well in the winter, it keeps you well all year round. And we'll put things in your, what I call the wellness wardrobe on the physical side, so that you can work on that emotional and spiritual side. So drveronica.com is where people can find me.
Excellent. And everybody, you'll be able to find that information on Dr. Veronica's show page. I think it will be available to you within seconds of you hearing this. So if you want to find out more about Dr. Veronica, you want to get that flu and cold toolkit, go to the show page. All that information will be available for you there. Veronica, I'm so excited to have you here today. Once again, you outshone yourself and really shared some very valuable information and some really heartfelt information to help people understand that they're not alone, that there's more out there for them, and it's time for them to step out into the world and be who they are. Thank you for joining me today. We truly appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Vince.
You're welcome. And on behalf of Mary and myself, we want to wish you a miracle day.
You've completed this episode of The Miracle You, but we have plenty more to help you discover your own personal passion and purpose. Head over to themiracleyou.com for free resources to assist you on your journey, as well as register for our free webinar, Discover Your Miracle Life, 3 mind-awakening steps toward your unique purpose, or apply for a one-on-one Your Life, Your Way breakthrough session and discover your next best step on your journey. All available exclusively on our website. That's themiracleyou.com. We look forward to sharing more experiences of passion, purpose, and life by design next time, right here on The Miracle You.